Welcome to everybody on the show. Uh, Today, we are going to just go into the bit of the history of Goa. A lot of us, most of us probably would have been to Goa sometime or the other. And it's very commonly referred to by tourists by the acronym of BBC, that is beaches, bars, and churches. And it's actually marketed as a tourist paradise. But actually, this perception is quite superficial because behind this facade lies a very extraordinary story of our civilization, which not many of us know, or we know in sketchy portions. And as we are aware, when we read about Goa and its history, mostly we start from the time the Portuguese came to Goa and uh, post the Portuguese arrival. Very few of us are aware of what was in Goa and who ruled Goa before that. So, just to give you an idea, uh, the earliest recorded uh, uh, name of Goa in writing dates to 2200 BCE in the Sumerian cuneiform writings. So that is the first time it is mentioned in writing. But of course, for those of us who know about our epics and our Vedic history, uh, we should know that it is known. It was known in the ancient times as Gomantak, and uh, the story of how Parashuram settled this region by bringing it out of the water by sending an arrow. So it has a very ancient sort of legacy behind it. But this whole ancient heritage actually underwent a cataclysmic shift with the arrival of the Portuguese rule. And I will just go into more details as we proceed with this presentation because it's something which I think all of us should know. A lot of history has been written about India and how it was colonized over time and details, but mostly they are about the other parts of India. Goa somehow has not got that sort of exposure about its history uh, during the colonial period and even before that period. So I think it is a interesting topic which everyone should be very interested in because of what happened there actually. So now we'll sort of go into the interiors of Goa, as I say, into its forests and its ancient legacy, which is there, and which basically whoever visits Goa, hardly any tourist or anyone goes to this place. Now, uh, this I have written a book, as Professor Rai mentioned, Temples of Goa: History, Portuguese Persecution and Revival. And you can see that I was lucky to be able to get the foreword written by a renowned journalist, author Francois Gautier, and the preface has been written by another renowned historian, Dr. Vikram Sampath. Most of us would have heard him somewhere or the other. And the introduction is by Dr. Arur, who is a local. So she has been able to provide a local flavor and give a very nice outline about the Goan landscape for an outsider to understand. The book is published by Indus University, and co-publishers, of course, are mentioned there. So, what you see is the cover of the book. The book is actually, it took me about 4 years of document-based research to write this, including my travels, because the book has a large number of nearly over 300 color photographs. Because uh, it's when you want to actually interest or catch the attention of a reader just writing text nowadays. Not many people are interested in reading. So I have actually got a lot of photographs and other images which will attract a person. And a lot of other records sort of researched in my 4 years of sort of work on this book. And I think it's come out quite well. Now, what you see, the artwork of the cover, those who are familiar with Goa would know this is known as Kavi art, and it's mentioned here. This is a very ancient and distinctive art form from Goa, striking terracotta red on a white background. Earlier, it was very commonly used. Now, it's not that much prevalent because of it's a very laborious process to make this to cover temples with this. And basically, earlier, a lot of temples had this, but this is one of that's how I've chosen this as the artwork for the book. Now, as I mentioned, I was lucky to get the forward and the uh, preface written, some comments by the people who have mentioned this, mentioned about the work which I have done. And now we'll go through the presentation quickly. It's basically, it explores the rich history, cultural heritage, and the sacred architecture of Goa's temples, tracing the journey from prehistoric times through colonial influence to their continuing significance even today. Now, this presentation basically is in two parts. My book also is also in these two parts. The first part goes into the history of the region and how the landscape has evolved through the ages. The part two is actually you can say, a sort of a travelogue, which contains most of my photographs, description of various major temples which I have included in this book. There are about 30, nearly 30 of them which are there. And not only the photographs and their history, but even the folklore associated with each temple, because each temple has its own story. So I have dug out those stories also. So actually, every temple, why it is significant, that is also I managed to compile together. Now, the part one, uh, just to tell you, all the photographs which you will see in my presentation are all taken by me. So, and they are part of the book, so they have been included there. Now, let us start from the beginning, long before the Portuguese arrived, long before the Mughals, and even before the period of the dynasties which ruled Goa. So, it is, as I was saying, uh, Goa's history stretches back from prehistoric settlements and early civilization. And in under this section, we'll just explore uh, which were those which were those cultures and the religions which influenced these major dynasties before the arrival of Portuguese. Now, Goa's history stretches back, as I mentioned, to the Vedic era and prehistoric settlements. And in our ancient texts, it finds detailed mention in the Sahyadri Kand of Puran. And these are those petro rock engravings which are there, which date to about 30,000 BCE. So there were settlements and people living in that area even at that place. And now, as I mentioned about the Sumerian writings, now you can just think about it, that when the Sumerians were mentioning about Goa and having trade connections with Goa, that was a time when Rome didn't even exist. So that is how old the Goan history is. Now, Goa actually was a very crucial maritime hub in the ancient times, and all the trade which happened from India with Egypt, with Mesopotamia, with the Greco-Roman world, a lot of it passed through Goa's ports in the ancient times. And so it played a very important part in the global sort of trade routes of since ancient times. And wherever there's civilization and wherever there are economies booming, there would be temples, and Goa had them in abundance from the beginning. Now, a bit about the dynasties which have ruled Goa since ancient times. The first dynasty, as such, before that, settlements are there and smaller populated enclaves, but formal dynasties, the first was the Mauryas who came and ruled this region in roughly the 4th century BC. And after that, as you can see, there were about 14 dynasties which ruled, including till the time the Portuguese came. And this period, which we are seeing over these 14 dynasties, lasted about roughly 2000 years. So, these 2000 years were the formal sort of period of dynastic rule, which included the Portuguese period. And as you would have seen, it's most of these dynasties which I showed, not many would be aware even of their names, but they were in their times quite, they had big area, and they were quite powerful kingdoms which ruled not only Goa but central and western, and including the southern part of India, like Vijayanagar Empire had a huge thing. So this is a bit about the past. Now, during each of these dynasties contributed to the evolution of the Goan landscape. Like the Mauryas brought the Vedic culture, and even Buddhism flourished side by side during its time. And then there were the Sihalas, who actually were very devout Shaivites, and their temples are all over the Konkan region. And but the dynasty which actually where Goa blossomed were the Kadambas, and that period of Kadamba rule is known as the golden age of Goa. They had ruled from about the 10th to the 14th century CE. And during their reign, Goa actually became the most powerful sort of region in place in the western part of India. Just to give a example, we all are aware that in the old days used to have these Ashwamedh yags, which were performed by the kings, and only big kings could, sort of had the resources to perform this yag. And during the Kadamba's reign, it is recorded that they have performed it 18 times in that period of their rule. So that just shows the how resourceful and how powerful that dynasty was. And the major port, which was also the capital, was Gopapatnam, which was a major port, and that's from where most of the trade and commerce took place. And of course, they built a large number of temples. Most of the ancient temples, though they existed in some form from ancient time, but formal structures and major constructions were, for a lot of these big shrines, were done during the Kadamba period. So then that's how, slowly the evolution of the Goan landscape has taken place till the time the Portuguese arrived. Now, Portuguese arrived, uh, uh, they conquered Goa actually in 1510. Vasco da Gama came in 1498, but near Calicut. But they actually, the first Viceroy Albuquerque, he captured Goa, conquered Goa in 1510. So he came after a period of approximately 2000 year rule by his the previous dynasties. Now that is the time when actually we call it the dark chapter in Goa's history, uh, uh, because as soon as they came, things there was a systematic cultural uh, sort of attack on the locals, because as we are aware, the conversions and other destructions started during that period. There were Islamic rulers also before the Portuguese, the Brahmins Sultanate, but uh, they were not as sort of destructive. They did damage and destroy temples, and normally, which has happened everywhere, but not to the extent to which the Portuguese finally went. And actually, there is a reason why the Portuguese behaved the way they did, because of the history back home in Europe before they came here. So I've covered that in reasonable detail in my book, I mean, bringing out why actually they behaved in such a brutal fashion in India when they arrived, because they had some baggage which they carried from about 200 years of rule of parts of Europe by the Muslims at that time. So that is the story. Now, this battle which I have shown on the slide, the Battle of Dew, this is actually a very significant battle. Most of us probably have not even heard of it. This took place in 1509, and it was there's a book written 50 battles that changed the world, and by William Ware. And if you see this, in that he has written that out of the 50 most significant battles which were turning points at various times in history, he rates this as the sixth most significant battle in world history. And the reason is that he says at the start of the 15th century, actually, that time Islam was in ascendancy, and they were sort of more or less dominating most of the world, and a lot of parts of Europe even were under their control. And it seemed that they will soon take over the whole world. But this battle, in which the Portuguese managed to defeat combined forces of Egypt and the Muslim world, they defeated them, and that dream of Islam spreading over the world was stopped due to just this battle. And that is the significance of this battle which took place. And of course, this is from when the Europeans or the Western dominance over the Indian Ocean and this part of the world commenced. Now, we are aware that the Portuguese rule was a very dark chapter in the history of Goa and of India, I'll say. And this is basically because of their the policies which they enforced for converting. The aim was very clear that heathenism has to be eradicated from the regions which were under their control. And for giving sort of justification to their actions, they had what is called as the doctrine of discovery. You can see this here. Doctrine of discovery was a very interesting uh, papal papal edict, which are known as papal bulls, which are issued in 1452 by the Pope, in which they had given the right for the Portuguese to attack, conquer, and subjugate Saracens and pagans and any other believers of Christ, and reduce them to perpetual servitude. So this actually, after this 1452, that is the time when the Portuguese first went to Africa, and that slave trade and all that which started during that period in the late 15th century was all actually justified under this doctrine of discovery, which had a sort of papal uh, sanction. So this is their justification under which they first went to Africa and colonized and the slave trade, and then coming to India, it continued that story. Now, uh, and then they had another mm, they had another official policy which they call the rigor de miscordia, that is rigor of mercy. Now, this policy, which started after they came to go around 1540, this was actually the policy was that they are doing it was by forcible conversion of heathens. It was actually an act of mercy towards them because they were saving their souls. So that is how the justification for various actions took place over time. And uh, based on that, the destruction of the temples and the orders, all these things flowed out of these two policies, which they followed and which for them were sort of law. So, in the actual destruction started around 1541. There was a royal decree by the King of Portugal to demolish all temples, and that the whole sequence then started from there. Now, I've tried to classify how the religious persecution took part. There were actually a two-pronged attack. One was various laws were enacted in which it was made uh, practicing Hinduism impossible by various things, like temples were demolished, and it was forbidden to build or even maintain the old ones. Various ceremonies, like even marriage ceremonies, sacred thread, birth rituals, they were all banned. Priests were banished. Often children was taken and baptized by force. Then all Hindus by order were forced to attend Christian sermons. The local language Konkani and all manuscripts and books were destroyed. Even cremating the dead was banned. You couldn't cremate a person who had died. So you can see there were very sort of very corrosion. A lot of corrosion was uh, imposed on the locals. And the second prong attack was the incentivizing conversion. Now, those who converted were given a lot of benefits. So that it was a two prong. One was you didn't allow a person to practice. Other was those who converted were given. Just to give an example, if uh, if the if a couple were there, if suppose the wife converted and the husband didn't, the wife could demand a share, could split the property of the husband and take a part of it with her. So, if the child uh, converted, the parents didn't, he could claim property and take it away in their lifetime. So, things like that. There were a lot of other things. So that is how this whole conversion sort of uh, was enforced on the locals. Uh, this this is this photograph which you see actually is how the people used to cremate the dead. Now, since cremation was banned, you couldn't burn the body, and which is sort of mandatory for any Hindu that he has to be cremated uh, for completing his the rituals. So what people used to do at midnight on a dark night, they used to keep the body. There's a river flowing, put it on a raft, burn it, and vanish into the forest because the Portuguese caught you, you were imprisoned straight away. So that is how this photograph just tries to depict how things were happening in those days. And this is a very nice quote by Voltaire, written in 1775 about how brutal this uh, Goan Inquisition was. For information, this Inquisition was set up in 1560 and it operated for about 252 years, that is 2.5 centuries, which, to put it in perspective, is more than the duration of the British Raj in India. So, but the story is not only one-sided. There was a lot of uh, destruction and corrosion involved, but then there was a fight back also, which about which again we are not very conversant with. So it was not that the locals just took everything uh, or in a passive manner or didn't fight back. So now this there was a lot of fight back in various forms. Of course, it was not much of physical resistance because of the power of the state was too overpowering for people to physically resist, but they did so in many other forms. And one of the things which very interesting is now what I call the flight of the deities. Now, nearly all the major temples were destroyed by the Portuguese without exception. All the ancient temples. So what the locals used to do when they used to come to know that, say, tomorrow or in advance, the temple is going to be destroyed. They used to take the murtis and spirit them away at night through the jungles, crossing rivers and taking them to places which are out of the Portuguese control. And that is how, though the temples may no longer be there, the original ones, but a lot of the original murtis survived by this action. And they set these murtis in new places outside the physical control of the Portuguese territory. And that is how there's a very unique term to Goa which came about, and that is they're known as refugee temples. So they are basically the murtis which are taken away from the original temples which were being destroyed and set up in new place. So there's a very unique term, refugee temples, which one doesn't hear anywhere else other than in Goa. And so most of the temples in Goa are basically refugee temples. Now, uh, as per the Portuguese records themselves, they destroyed nearly 648 temples in the areas of the Old Conquest. Now, Old Conquest was the region, basically three districts, Bardez, Tiswadi, and Salsette, three districts which originally were under Portuguese control in the initial period when they came to Goa. So they were known as the old conquests. And the new conquests came under their control much later. Slowly, they managed to increase their area which they were controlling. But the main destruction and the atrocities occurred in the old conquest because that was the time when they were the most sort of violent against the locals. So in the old conquests alone, that is just three districts, as per their records, roughly 648 temples were destroyed during the period of the Inquisition. And a lot of it is not directly documented, but they have these municipal records and correspondences by the which the local missionaries used to write to their superiors in Portugal. So a lot of all this has been sort of extracted from those documents. Now, as I said, temple relocation. I just already mentioned these are those refugee temples set up at new places. And then they followed the normal practice. Wherever a temple was destroyed, a church was set up on that, and basically as a visible symbol of supremacy. So they raised the temples and set up churches, which has happened in many parts of India, uh, elsewhere also by other invaders. So now this all happened during that first period of uh, Portuguese rule, and it was only after the rise of Maratha power in India, when Shivaji and all grew more powerful, and they could sort of pressurize the Portuguese, that some sort of, the violence, and that they could get them to reduce that. And the first approval of construction of a temple given by the Portuguese was in 1818, 1818 AD. So that is nearly 300 years after they arrived in Goa. The first temple which was constructed in Goa was 300 years after their arrival. So for 300 years, no temple could be built, and you couldn't even maintain the existing ones, whatever they were in whatever state. So that is how sort of drastic uh, things were imposed on the locals. Now, uh, temples actually have a very major role in sort of preserving our civilization, which, despite centuries of attacks by invaders, have still our practices, our religious customs, traditions have survived, and the temples have actually played a key role in this whole uh, process of survival. Uh, One, most of us look at temple as a place just where you go and maybe pray and come back, and that also not many people do that. But actually, in the old time, temples were actually the main institutions which have actually managed to keep the community together, preserve the history and the identity, and act as a rallying point for people of the community around it. And not only these functions, it also performed a very important function, which is given here, the economic function, which one is not aware of. Temples, in effect, acted as banks of the ancient time. There were no banks or uh, those sort of anything to provide money for various activities. So the temples were actually used to uh, perform a very important socio-economic role by funding community projects. So there are a lot of stories, not only in Goa, across India. So a lot of like roads, making irrigation projects, canals. These all A lot of these were funded by the temple. So what we are donating a temple was not just hoarded and just kept away. It was recycled into the community, and that's how they provided employment. The temples were acted as a school for the children to go and study, and they sustained the community life. So the temples played a very important role in why and how we have been able to survive, and ours is probably the only ancient civilization which still survived across the world. And now I'll just mention a bit about the worship of deities. One interesting fact is that mm, uh, though there are a multiplicity of gods and goddesses as anywhere in India, but Devi worship has sort of primacy in Goa. The female Shakti is more sort of worshipped than the male gods. And that is a very interesting thing about Goa. And the other thing unique to Goa is the social hierarchies which determine the privileges that various sets of villagers enjoy. So there is something very again unique to Goa, and different people in a community, by virtue of their history and their role, like the descendants of the original people who are in a village have more sort of rights over the temple and its functioning and the community lands. So this is something very unique in Goa, and it's quite complicated. But it's worthwhile knowing that it's not like in other parts of uh, the country, like one family will sort of Brahmins, or one family or something will be running a temple and controlling its affairs. Here there are different stages, different sets of people have different sort of privileges in each temple and in the community and the community lands. And this actually social status of the shrines, this was formally codified by the Portuguese when they came out with a law. And after that, every temple had to sort of register who's got what status and who's the Mahajan, or who's the, various people connected. And these, what they codified in this 1881, this law, even till today, it functions based on, that's the basic origin of the law which still governs most of these things. So this was about the sort of historical part. The part two, as I said, is about the temples itself as such. And so now this is what, let's see what actually survived and what was rebuilt. Now, Goa's temples are quite extraordinary, and unlike those which you will find in most other parts of the country. Whoever has been to Goa will see them. They are quite unique in their architecture and other things. And each their architecture is different. The visual aesthetics of a temple are totally different from normal temples which we visualize. Now, there are certain distinctive features of temple architecture, and these, the present day temples, they are actually a synthesis of many forms. The first being the Kadamba architecture, because they are probably the first who actually did large scale construction. Then you have Hoysala influences, Vijayanagar Empire came, they repaired a lot of temples, so that influence came. And then subsequently, Islamic and Portuguese elements also got fused into the architectural design of temple. So if you see a temple, it looks at times a bit like a church. Sometimes it gives a Islamic sort of flavor. So it's actually a fusion of a lot of these original designs which have are now apparent in any temple in Goa. And few of the other things, like most of the temples have very intricate woodwork. Now you can see this is a panel from one of the temples photographs I have taken. They have a lot of woodwork because probably wood was easily available. So there's a lot of woodwork in the temples. Then another very interesting part of a temple is the deep thumb. Now, these deep thumb or lamp towers are there in temples in all parts of India, but here they became big structures actually. And in many places, we'll see in a few photos later, they are actually an octagonal turret, 5 to 7 stories high. They are a huge uh, structure by itself. So this became sort of a landmark. And one of the reasons which is quoted why these deep thumbs became a major part of a temple was the Portuguese had put restrictions on the height of a temple which could be built. So to beat that law, they started building higher deep thumbs because this was supposed to be not part of the main temple, so they could go higher than those specified restrictions. So that is one of the uh, reasons why these deep thumbs grew into big structures by themselves. And then this Naubat Khana is there. A lot of the entrance gates of the temple, you'll find a small 2 rooms on top of the structure where musicians sit and play. So this is actually associated with Islamic design, and it has been incorporated in a lot of temples in Goa. And then vibrant colors. I think every temple you go to Goa has vibrant colors, not only outside but even inside. So it's very different from a normal uh, bland stonework or sub temple which we are normally familiar with. Now, this island, I like to highlight significance of Deepwadi. Now, this, uh, as I said, most of the temples in Goa, the ancient temples, trace their history to the epics and the Puranas. Now, this island of Deepwadi, which is now known as Diwar, uh, it is it was a very holy place, and this is the site where originally they say that the Saptarishis had performed uh, a huge yag for a long period of time, and Shivji got pleased and he came in physical form and sort of blessed the Saptarishis. So where the original Shivling was consecrated, this was on this island of Diwar. So this whole island became a is a very was a very revered place of pilgrimage in the ancient times till the Portuguese came, and a lot of huge grand temples existed on this island uh, till this period. Unfortunately, all every temple on the island has been razed to the ground. So this photograph which you see is that you have these pushkar, the temple tanks. This is the temple tank of one of the major temples, Koteshwar temple, which was there. The temple, there's a church on top of it, so temple of course doesn't exist, but these are the ruins of one of the tanks which you can see. So that is how this island was a very significant uh, place in the spiritual sort of development of Goa. And many travelers have also mentioned during the Portuguese time that these temples which existed initially there, they were equal in artistic beauty to the temples of South India which we see today. So you can imagine how grand temples were there at one time in Goa, but not even one of them exists today. Now, just a bit that why I have gone into a lot of included a lot of photographs in my book is basically to catalog, and I feel that it sort of documents whatever is there, including the ruins, as well as a wider audience can appreciate what exists in Goa as such. Now, now I'll just run through the temples. I won't spend time on that. I have covered a total of about 30 temples in my book, which is roughly half the book, and which includes shrines from north to south, matlab all across Goa. And it's not only photographing the temples and giving the history of temple. Each of them, each temple has its own history and its own story. So I have actually sat. This is one slide. The second slide is this. So a total of about 30 sites are there, and each temple has a story to tell about its antiquity, destruction, migration, renewal. So even the folklore of each temple, I've managed to collate by talking to the locals, the priests, and others. So why it is significant? Each temple has some specific uh, sort of USP. So, what is the USP of that temple? That also is all catalogued in the book. Now, this is the first temple and most important temple I'll say in Goa, because this is the only temple in Goa which has survived the Portuguese rule. And why it survived? Because it is in a very remote jungle area. Now, of course, there's a road which goes, but earlier it was in the dense jungles far away from any habitation. It's a 12th century Kadamba dynasty temple. So it just survived because of its location and because it was totally out of the way and in the dense town. So this is the only surviving temple in Goa which is intact as of date. And then we have a large number of temples. First, one or two, like the Shanta Durga temple, it is on, there are about two or three temples which are on any tourist route. So if you catch a tourist sort of a bus or take a tourist tour, you'll go to two, three temples, out of which this is one of the Shanta Durga temple. It's one of the very famous temples. And as you'll see, the original temple located in Salsette, one of the old conquest areas, which was destroyed in 1566. The Vigraha was smuggled to this place and set up. So another, it's an example of another refugee temple, as I'll say. And many of these temples were set up, they say they were the original, when Parashuram came and set up Goa, he got uh, 66, matlab, there were a number of Gauda Saraswat Brahmins which he got from Bihar families, and this he got them to settle here. And from Bihar, how they reached Bihar, they were actually the he got them here. And like Salsette actually is a distortion of the word 66, chachat. So 66 families settled in that place, Salsette, which got distorted Sachet to Salsette when the Portuguese came. So that is how, these some many of these shrines which are there were got by these Saraswat Brahmins who came from Bihar with them from there. So this temple, the original temple which was there in Kaloshi, had the shrine here had been got by the Saraswat Brahmins. So it is of that ancient, of that antiquity, I'll say. So like that, there are large number of temples. I'll not go into the detail. I mean, it's anyone interested can read from the book. But each of these temples have their own story. This again is a refugee temple. It was located in Salsette, original or destroyed. The Vigraha was brought here and set up. So, that's how the story goes for every temple. Now another temple, this is the main shrine. This again is a uh, refugee temple. It was located in that Diwar Island, original Santa Durga temple. So this story sort of repeats of most of the temples. Then you have some unique architecture. This temple which is there in Kavarem, it's sort of looks like a Buddhist uh, uh, architecture has been used here. Again, there was an ancient temple on this side. So now this is another interesting temple, Shaptkoteshwar temple. The original temple, as I said, was on Diwar Island, which was consecrated by the Saptrishis in prehistoric times. So that when that was broken, uh, the uh, the shrine was spirited away, and finally it was put in this temple which exists. And this is one of the big Shiva temples in the Konkan area. So, and this was constructed by Shivaji himself. His original plaque order of 1668 ordering for the construction of this is still preserved in this temple. One can see that plaque. So this is the Saptkoteshwar at Diwar Island. We've seen that tank earlier. This is another view of that, which was where that Saptkoteshwar was originally. So that is how the story of these temples go. Each of these have a history basically connected to the Portuguese destruction somewhere, and then the temple came up uh, later on somewhere else. This is one of the few temples which was outside the Portuguese influence area of influence, so it has escaped destruction, and one of the few temples of Vishnu in Goa, and again one of the only temples without that standard turret design. It is there. And just for information, this tank, which you see, water tank, it extends under the temple to the other side. So this temple, actually, the shrine is Vishnu's Murti, Anant Shaya Murti is actually on a water body, even today. Beautiful from inside. This is that deep stham which I was talking about. These structures are bigger than the temple themselves. Again, one of the temples destroyed. Now, this is an interesting fact. There was this, there was a fort at Rachol in Salsette. The captain of that fort was a very, I mean, he had a very bad, I mean, he is one of those in the forefront of demolishing. And it is said that he single-handedly destroyed 280 temples just in 1 year in 1567 in Salsette. So that is the sort of, I mean, how the destruction took, the scale of the destruction. One person destroyed 280 temples in 1 year. So it's nearly a temple a day or a temple in a day and a half you're destroying. So that's the scale of destruction which we can't visualize. Malsa, Narayani, Devala, and Varna. This again has a big history. It's one of the original shrines brought by the Saraswat Brahmins from Bihar. And this a new temple has been built here. This flooring and all is of the original temple, the ancient temple. The flooring was not destroyed. They destroyed the superstructure. Now, the interesting part of this is after this temple was destroyed, as usual, the Portuguese wanted to build on this something, a church, another thing. But throughout the uh, period of Portuguese rule of 450 years, every time they tried to build something on this piece of land, it was unsuccessful. So this land remained barren. The only place probably where a church is not there on an ancient temple, because every time they tried to build, it was unsuccessful for some reason or the other. So now they have recently built a new temple on this land. And this, as you see, and some structure of the ancient temple are still there for this reason. This again is one of the temples on the tourist route. Mangesh Temple. Anyone who's been to Goa, I'm sure, would have seen it. It looks a lot like a church, actually. Again, a refugee temple. The original temple was somewhere else. It was brought here, the Murti. So I'll just now just go through uh, uh, quickly this thing. This is one of the few Ram temples. The shrine came from Rameshwaram here for teaching, to spread the teachings of Ram. This again is original was broken. It was in original temple was in Salsette, broken. This was set up here. So this story I will not repeat. A large number. You'll see beautiful temples, grand, uh, vibrant colors. Again, another refugee temple. Original was somewhere brought here. The Lakshmi Narasimha temple. So, you know, actually, one is not aware that such magnificent temples exists in Goa. This temple, uh, I met the priest and spoke to him. They have the copper plate inscription for this temple dating to 1128. Even today, it's available in the archives. So these were of that vintage, these temples. So that's how they are. Devki Krishna, another refugee temple. The original was in Chorao Island, broken. The Vigraha was brought here. A Brahma temple. So now this is another interesting thing. These Harvalem Shiva cave temple. They are made in laterite excavation, and they are the biggest laterite cave cave excavations in India. You have a lot of big caves and rock and other things like Elephanta caves or Ajanta Ellora and all. But laterite, these are the biggest caves. And there are two stories about their origin. Some say there are actually five rooms in this. So they say the Pandavas stayed here during their exile period, and some say these are originally Buddhist caves, but now they are shivling uh, installed in these. Another ancient temple, uh, ancient. The shrine is new, but it was an ancient site where the original temple of from about 5th to 6th century was there earlier, which no longer exists. So near to this, that Rudreshwar temple, where this near to those cave temple, and this is known as Bhim Kund. There's a waterfall 50 meters. So they say when the Pandavas were staying in the cave, Bhim sort of shot an arrow to get water, and this kund was created after that. So that's how it's known as Bhim Kund. So this on Diwar Island, a small temple, not ancient shrine, this is a new shrine, but the location is very revered. It is Panchganga Sangam because this is where five rivers meet. So Panchganga Sangam, these five rivers, Zuari, Balwanti, Bichlim, Madai, and Khandepar. So it was a very revered site since ancient times. This is Morjai temple, one of the few temples which has that Kavi art still there adorning it. Beautiful sculptures, I mean paintings of Kavi art inside. This again has a very interesting story. There's a legend by the name of Seven Sisters and a Brother Story of Goa, very famous. Those who are aware would have heard it. And this is uh, all these uh, siblings actually had said they will meet every year. So they have these seven temples where they have these yatras at each temple in different times of the year, which these festivals continue. And interestingly, one of them is a church, the Our Lady of Milgrave Church at Mapusa. So they say that one of them converted to Christianity. So that church also forms part of that circuit. So when these yatras and celebrations take part, both the Hindu and the Christian community jointly, celebrate in both these places. So it's a very interesting fusion of how, the religious as well as the cultural traditions have evolved over time. Another another very famous temple right at the south near the Karnataka border. Uh, this again is a original temple, not destroyed because very far away, but a very ancient site. And the shrine here is Swambhu shrine that is self-manifested. It's not made by man. It's actually a cylindrical uncut stone which was discovered during some excavate digging. So the temple was then constructed on that. Parashuram temple, there were other Parashuram temples, but they're all broken. This is one of the few which still exists, and we are aware of the history or story of Parashuram, who created this whole, supposed to have created this whole strip of land along the western coast. Then this is another very interesting uh, st- shrine, which is very followed by a large, which has a large following. There is Betal, and this is the biggest in Goa at Lolium. This is again South Goa. So these are basically Gram Devtas, or village deities, and they are supposed to protect the village outside where they are placed. And so they are not supposed to have a cover over the head. So these shrines are in the open, right in the forest, as you can see. And they are large shrine. You can see I am standing, this is about 8 feet high. And I mean, you come and do your puja and all. And it's not, people have an idea that there's animal sacrifice, or, liquor or not, meat is, all that is not there. It's a normal thing. There's no animal sacrifice or non-veg sort of chadhawa here. But they are very popular and much venerated. These Betal is one of the biggest followings in it has. Another small temple, it has its own history. So now we have finished with the temples. Now this is, as I had mentioned earlier, there was that chieftains, martyrs, that revolt which took place in 1583. So this actually, the Goans and claim that this was the first sort of revolt against colonial powers in India. Uh, uh, of course, the British came much later, and 1583 was the first time a revolt took place by the locals in recorded history in India. And there were about 15 chieftains, and the missionaries came to forcibly convert in a village, and these locals killed those missionaries. So it became a big issue in those days. Naturally, all these locals were killed, and the biggest temple in this area was razed to the ground. All that happened, but this was the first revolt against colonial powers in the country. The Archaeological Survey Museum, it was actually a disappointment. They continue to highlight the Portuguese more than the Indian, and the past dynasties and all are sort of glossed over. So it is a bit of a letdown, and the museum itself is housed behind the church as a part of a church. So I think that the ASI needs to sort of look up what they want to showcase about our past. So this is the end of the presentation which I had. Now, as you would have realized, that Goa's temples actually represent a journey of resilience and artistic splendor, and their presence continues to inspire cultural pride and spiritual devotion even today. And if someone has been and stayed in the out of the main cities, or even a little bit inside, it is, I find the locals are much more spiritually oriented in Goa as compared to nearly any other place in India, which sounds surprising. But actually, if you go, each temple celebrates each festival with such fervor and enthusiasm. It's actually it's worth just seeing how they are continuing our ancient traditions and culture even today. So uh, that's why I focused on the temple, because they have actually formed the mainstay of what exists today and provided a continuity from ancient times till today.
Thank you, sir. Brigadier Singh. Yeah, go ahead, Rai Saab.
Yeah, please,
No. Please go ahead. Rai Saab, please go ahead.
Just I was requesting the audience, if they have any question, they can ask him.
Hello.
Uh, Go ahead, Professor A.K. Jain.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Rai. Thank you, Singh Saab, for such a wonderful lecture. And you have brought out many things in the history of Goa which were completely unknown to us, to the larger audience. At least I don't know much of it. And I didn't know that it has such a glorious past of where such glorious temples existed. The advent of Portuguese in 15th century, I think, kind of this is also the time when other colonial powers entered in India. So how these colonial powers interacted? Am I audible?
I can hear you.
Yeah. So when other colonial powers were also occupying the country at the similar time, so how
Did you share?
how they interacted with each other?
Chaji, I'll do that.
What was the, for example, the British and Portuguese, did they cooperate or they kind of uh,
Hey, in this, actually, the Portuguese were the first to reach. They came before the other powers.
okay.
And the first sort of major Western power which now. So as I was saying that the Portuguese were the first. They came before the others. And that's how they say that Vasco da Gama is the one who discovered sort of India.
Mhm.
So the first major Western power which established itself in India was the Portuguese, and they created a big empire within a very short time.
Mhm.
Because I'll just give you a little background. See, initially all these people came for trade.
Yes.
Now, before the Portuguese came, the whole trade from India, which was basically spice trade, was the most profitable, and then textiles and other things were also there. That was going to Europe from the time of the Romans, and from ancient times. So during this period, before the Portuguese came, the main control of the complete trade from the east was by Venice, the Venetians. That's how Venice at this period, that is the 15th century, and that around that period, that was the most powerful place of Europe, one of the most powerful, you can say, I won't say kingdom, but whatever you call it. The whole trade was controlled by the Venetians, and it was routed through Syria and Alexandria. So
Mhm.
there was a stake by the Egyptians, because it went through Alexandria, then via Venice into Europe. So the Egyptians were making a good profit, the Venetians were making even better profit, And that's how, by the time all these spices and all reached Europe, they were exorbitantly priced. Now, what happened is uh, the interesting part is who was supplying from India. It was the Gujarati merchants. They were the pipeline on ground who were supplying all this. The Gujarati merchants were very much in that pipeline, I'll say. Now, when the Portuguese came, they saw this whole thing, and their aim was to take over control of the trade. Now, they couldn't do it through the land route because it was already through Egypt and all, which was already established. Now, what happened is the Zoom on? Acha,
Yeah,
acha.
Zoom is on. I thought I'll supplement what you're talking about.
Okay. So now what happened is that's how the Portuguese they discovered. I mean that Cape of Horn wala route was discovered because they to control this trade they couldn't throw out these existing players. So they said they'll open a new route via Africa, and which was shorter also and faster. So by coming through Cape of Good Hope, the aim was to establish. Now, once they reached here, and in the initial years when the spice sort of market started shifting, because via the shipping route via Cape of Good Hope, the Portuguese were able to outsell these spices in Europe, undersell the spices in Europe from for what these Venetians and the Egyptians were at the price at which they were selling. So that is this battle of due was basically that. So what happened? These people decided to strike back. The original sort of traders that community and versus the Portuguese. So what was done is the Venetians provided the manned ships, fighting ships. The Egyptians, the Malmuks hote the in Egypt, who were the controlling the trade, they provided ships. Now in India, the Gujarati, as I said, they were also stakeholders. So that time, Gujarat was ruled by a Muslim. He was a Muslim ruler, Sultan. I am forgetting his name. So these three parties joined together. The Gujarati Sultan का due में जो था that they provided some manpower and ships. The Egyptians provided, the Venetians provided. Venetians only provided ships, they didn't provide any fighting force. So they had a big force which was there, which concentrated at Diu. Now, this fight which took place, the Portuguese were outnumbered in terms of the number of ships and fighting people, but due to better strategy and probably the cannons and all, they had better weapons. They could defeat that whole armada, and that's how that whole trade balance then shifted from the existing one to the Portuguese got control of this whole thing, and then Lisbon became the entry point for all this into Europe. The British and all came later, but what happened actually, the Inquisition uh, was so repressive that a large population, see, the wealth in old days mainly was agricultural wealth. Your wealth came from agriculture. In any of these old empires, agriculture was basically the wealth. Now, because of the repressive nature of the Inquisition, a large population fled Goa. So their agriculture produce plummeted because for economy you need people, and if people have all run away, so who's going to, from where will the money come? So within actually 15th century, it's 16th century, mm, uh, see 1510 they conquered Goa. By the end of the century itself, the decline had started because of the population fleeing the place, and the economy slowly started going down. So it's a very interesting study if you look at it, how, and then the British sort of rose.
No,
They,
I have another point, just a
Hmm.
short point. You have given a very long answer, the long history. I think that needs another lecture from you. When Britishers came, they didn't indulge in destroying temples
Correct.
like Portuguese did. I don't see. uh, I don't see much evidence, or is there any evidence of
No,
Britishers
no, no,
also?
no. They see, they came, they were very clever that way, I'll say. They came basically for trade. Initially, to it was East India Company, it was not the empire as such. So
Yeah.
very clear, they were in trade, and then they slowly got into politics, sort of control of the local rajas and the
Mm.
smaller kingdoms. So they were not looking at even conversion, they were not interested in initially.
Mm.
I don't know if you are aware. I think when the the East India Company came, they didn't indulge in conversion at all. It was not a sort of I don't know if it was by order or otherwise. This was not part of the agenda at all. They were very clear of what they were doing.
Professor
That
Jain, I
conversion and
think,
all came much later.
Professor Jain, you
Yes.
can discuss with Brigadier AP Singh like
Mm.
that. And
Yeah.
I will give you telephone number.
Yeah.
Professor Rustagi wants to supplement his lecture by
No,
some.
no, no, no. As he was saying, because he was raising issue of the role of UK and all, I had meant to put this slide at the introduction to say the Portuguese were the first ones who had
Yes,
come after the Mughals, and the rest of the Europeans came later.
Correct.
yeah.
And that is what I wanted to put in context, that today, look at real GDP growth of India versus the rest. You look at the GDP in dollars, India versus the rest. So that is what I wanted to say, that India was following a policy of synergistic growth. And we have, as Brigadier Singh said, came back. The rest of them, they're nowhere.
Yeah, yeah.
But Brigadier Singh, floor is yours. And if you can wrap up, that would be great. If you have any other thoughts as you were completing your comments in response to Professor Jain.
No, I think this slide highlights it very clear. As you have said, the British came only around 1700. So they came nearly 150 years plus later.
So,
Professor Nisha Singh, if you have any question, Nisha Singh probably she's not there.
I think she may have gone. Anyone else who has any question, please unmute yourself.
Vishnu Chandra, and I have no question, but it is a very, very informative lecture. Only one information I just want to confirm. Dr. Mr. Singh has talked about place Mangesh Temple. This Mangesh is same as Mangeshkar, where Lata Mangeshkar belongs to. There is a Mangesh village also.
हाँ मंगे I
ये
think
भगवान
that
भगवान शिव जी का मंदिर है वो.
But I have been to that Mangesh village where Lata Mangeshkar and family belong.
no, that village that is a village by that name, but
Yeah.
Mangesh is actually Shivji ka one of his sort of roop in which he is worshipped.
Okay.
With that,
Actually, yeah, Professor
yeah, go
Rustagi.
ahead, Raisa, please. Thank
Actually,
Professor.
that was the period where the exodus from Europe started. They came to Asia, especially to India. They went to America. They went to Africa, uh, getting the slaves and bringing to America. and they rounded the whole world. I have read that Portuguese and Spanish, they used to play football with the head of the Red Indians, killed, captured, and killed in the fighting. And so, one thing, Brigadier AP Singh, that when uh, Islam came to countries in Arab like Egypt, Mesopotamia, Iran, in one decade, the whole country was converted to Islam. And they have tried their best to mass conversion in India, but they are not successful. When we were so strong, so cultured, then what was the reason of downfall of kingdoms in India?
ये तो see, what you're saying is correct. It's a very, I think, there'll be more people
Another
who
another discussion.
another discussion, but one should never few things which people generally, layman, when you talk to someone, we have always fought back uh, against all the invaders, which is again not only in Goa, everywhere, which is not much highlighted in history. And we have always fought back. And as I said, our temples and our culture and traditions have given us a very strong sort of footing to survive whatever attacks have come against us. And one uh, people I personally feel it's that is my feeling, that people don't realize the role of, as I said, the temples and of the Brahmin community, which has been vilified. But one should realize that vilification of Brahmins started when and why. I'm sure there are many people would be more learned, but this basically is the outcome of 1857 revolt, and it became an official policy of the British to target the Brahmins, because all these invaders realized that till the time the Brahmins are there, they cannot touch the sort of community or sort of make them, as a community to convert them or the other. So all this is, if one reads the aftermath, I'm sure people one would be aware that after 1857 there was a commission set up by the British. I'm forgetting the name of in which they went into the details of why that revolt took place and how to ensure such a revolt never happens again. And there were a lot of recommendations made by that commission, in which this disintegrating our society was one of the uh, uh, means to be employed in future to try and make sure that you are never together unified. So vilification or stratification of communities, that caste system, all that is an outflow of basically that commission's work. Or the Sikhs, they set up that SPGC to separate the Sikhs from the Hindus. It's a separate religion, there no connection. All that has happened after 1857. So one needs to go into those details to actually realize uh, the condition of our society today is an outcome of uh, policies which the British sort of set up in their time. And we should be sort of smart enough to realize why they were implemented and how we can get over them now, though it looks very difficult.
Professor Laukus Misra wants to say something. Laukus ji. please.
Sir, I have already messaged that in later phase, I have read in some books, and there are some historical evidences also that women were especially forced to convert into Christianity at large number, and we have seen somewhere that mentioned that their breasts were cut down because of refusing to convert, especially tribes in Goa. Is it true, Brigadier Sahab?
हाँ, you had आपको फोटो आपने देखी होगी, आप what you are saying, it was part of the torture tools of the Goan Inquisition. They had those breast rippers. आपने देखा होगा वो.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
these were all were used मतलब liberally, I'll say, to convert and torture the people.
Brij Kishore ji also wants to say something.
Well, after this very rigorous research and documentation by Brigadier AP Singh, I am inclined to visit Goa and spend some more days there. Thank you, Brigadier Saab. But
You may come to my residence in Goa.
okay, that would be great. That would be great.
Only thing is
I
that
have a request. I have a
हाँ,
request. The term refugee temple, can we find a better term to explain? Because the whole process is not taking a refuge, but re-establishing a culture which was under attack, and then you rejuvenate it. I think somebody must have used the term refugee, and it is going on. The whole story is of creation of a culture of more than 2000 years, and then the process of the attempt to destroy, and then a very successful attempt to rejuvenate. I think very interesting, and the story of the uh, 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 entire history of Bharat, that is India. Very interesting. I'm very so many new things I've learned. But only thing is that the statement that is made that Britishers are not interested to convert even when they started to invade India. I think that needs to be looked into, because there are evidences that Britishers sent missionaries before they actually started occupying the territories in India. I think that needs to be historically confirmed whether they were not interested in conversions. Thank you so much. Thank you, the organizers, and
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you very much,
Professor
Kutiala ji. I
Virendra
also agree
Rustagi,
with you.
especially, who invited me for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
and
And I think
just
brigadiers. Yeah, sorry.
no,
Go
no.
ahead.
I was just mentioning. The previous speaker said he'll be going to Goa with a fresh sort of look. So I think you should read my book before going. You'll
Yeah,
actually
before
then.
going there.
I'm already looking at it in the Amazon. I'm already looking at
It's
it. And
available on Amazon, and it's actually in great detail. A lot of these things are mentioned. It's about nearly 400 pages, the book, so it's
I
quite a.
think after reading your book and listening to your this, the Goa may be rediscovered by us.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Sir,
No,
sir,
thank
I
you.
have a question.
To Professor Rustagi, please.
Yeah, what I was suggesting was it's a very interesting topic. If Brigadier Singh, if you're okay, maybe we have a discussion session on this in a future week. Because a lot of us have questions and suggestions, as Professor Kotiala did, or Vice Chancellor Kotiala ji. We and I agree with him that refugee temple somehow didn't sound right. But this would take a lot longer to discuss. If that's okay, we could probably schedule another meeting, and I'll let Rai Saab address
Yeah.
Dr. Sanat Kumar, and then he can
Yes,
conclude.
sir.
Then after that, conclude, please.
Sir, I have a question. First, I express my gratitude to you, sir, for your this insightful lectures. I have a query, sir. I want to know which type of stone used in the temples of Goa.
नहीं इसमें सी lot of these ancient जो temples थे, they were both types. You had basalt rock temples because these ancient grand temples which I was mentioning now, which were made in Kadamba time and all, they were these basalt rock temples because they were huge, big structures. They were not. I mean, as the travelers are sort of comparing with the temples of South India. But they also used a lot of that local laterite stone. So if you saw that temple at Varna, जो था जिसका flooring was visible, and those Pushkar, जो temple tank का surrounding wall, that is all laterite stone, जो locally sort of available. So I think laterite was more commonly used being a local thing, but the grander temples were probably basalt stone. Like this Tamdi Surla, that temple which I showed, the first temple, that again stone has been, it's not local available, it's come from outside. It was
Okay.
brought from outside.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
But a lot of woodwork is there in all temples, and it was always
सर
there.
एक
So
कॉन्फ्रेंस में हूँ,
wood
थोड़ी
was
देर
a
में
big
करता हूँ आपको।
material in the old days.
Professor Rustagi, please.
No, you can conclude, Professor Rai.
No, please, you say something.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Brigadier Singh. Excellent presentation, very informative. And this is something we want to have more of a discussion on, and we'll talk to you again as to how do we do that. Because these kinds of topics require discussion as we go. And if we could adjust the format a little bit, that's something I'll talk to you. And Dr. Kutiala ji, who's in media, he would have more of a suggestion, and we can figure out how best to structure later on. So thank you very much, Brigadier Singh.
Thank you.
And looking forward to have more conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Good night
Bye.
to
Namaste.
Night.
everyone.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
bye. This
सबको
concludes the
नमस्ते,
session.
नमस्ते, नमस्ते, थैंक यू।